Hi, I'm your host, Brent. Welcome to The Climate Guru, where we discuss pressing environmental issues, including with leading experts. Join us for insightful conversations to inform and inspire action in your everyday life.
Hi, this is Brent, the Climate Guru, and I'd like to acknowledge Pope Francis, who just passed away. He was a remarkable environmentalist. He had a dedication to studying and preserving the natural areas, and took a really great interest in climate and environmental issues. In 2014, 1 year before the Paris Climate Accords, he said, if we destroy, creation will destroy us. He spoke very directly of the grave implications of climate change and the environmental crisis, and also the social, economic, and political ramifications of that. Pope Francis was unusual and unique in a number of ways. He took the name of Francis Assisi, who lived in Italy in the 13th century, a monk who is known to love nature, animals, appreciate them, and to protect them. St. Francis was from Argentina, the global south. And so you have a pope for the first time from the global south, which is the poorer area of the world. He was a Jesuit. The Jesuits not only were great in matters of faith, but also in matters of education and study. And he emanated Francis Assisi, who chose to live in harmony with nature and also among the poor. St. Francis always served as his inspiration. And Pope Francis believed that societal justice is an aspect of climate change. He said we have to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. He warned that humanity was taking the earth to a breaking point, that humanity was turning the glorious creation of God into a polluted wasteland, full of debris, desolation, and filth, as he said. He brought fossil fuel heads of corporations to the Vatican to hold them to account for their failure to reduce measures to reduce fossil fuel emissions. He wrote this encyclical in 2015. I read it in the last couple of days. It's 180 pages long. It shows a profound understanding of environmental issues, of the science of the environment. It's remarkable how much he understood and could explain. He condemned the fossil fuel companies for seeking only profit and ignored destruction of the planet. He blasted society for obsession with overconsumption and consumerism. He felt that there was a devastating effect of climate change and destruction of the environment, especially on the poor. Issues of environmental justice were very important to him. He also focused on the loss of biodiversity, one of the biggest issues that we face on the planet. He said even the smallest microorganisms, worms, fungi, algae, insects, reptiles, plants, have to survive and thrive to maintain a balance of the earth. He talked about the importance of soil, water, and air. He discussed the explosion of urban areas, which really had a negative psychological and social effect on many who lived in urban areas. He called it the breakdown of society. And also discussed the inequality as a result of climate change and environmental change, including the global south, not only individuals, but entire nations. He said a true ecological debt exists between the global north and the global south. The global north disproportionately uses the national resources of the global south and have done so over 100 years. And he also has condemned corporations and governments, especially in rich countries, failure to respond to the environmental destruction of the earth. So he's been a real champion for the environment. Whether or not my listeners are religious, it's very much inspiring to read the Pope's pronouncements and Encyclical. It's really almost an encyclopedia of environmental issues, the science, the effects of the politics involved. And so I would say to you, it's inspiring to read that and see such an important figure who understood clearly and deeply the issues affecting the environment and the importance of changing society, changing corporations, changing the economy, changing the attitude of individuals to really recover the natural world, which from his perspective was a gift from God and something that we're required to care for. So I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to read some quotes from his Encyclical, and I hope you find them inspiring. St. Francis, his Encyclical. I don't want to write this Encyclical without turning to that attractive and compelling figure, whose name I took as my guide and inspiration when I was elected Bishop of Rome. I believe that St. Francis of Assisi is the example par excellence of care for the vulnerable and of an integral ecology lived out joyfully and authentically. He's the patron saint of all who study and work in the area of ecology. He's also much loved by non-Christians. He particularly was concerned about God's creation and for the poor outcast. He was a mystic and a pilgrim who lived in wonderful harmony with God, with others, with nature, and with himself. And he shows just how inseparable the bond is between concern for nature, justice for the poor, commitment to society, and interior peace. Some forms of pollution are part of people's daily experience. Exposure to atmospheric pollutants produces a broad spectrum of health hazards, especially for the poor, and causes millions of premature deaths. People take sick, for example, from breathing high levels of smoke from fuels used in cooking or heating. There's also pollution that affects everyone, caused by transport, industrial fumes, insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, agrotoxins in general. Technology, which is linked to business interests, is presented as the only way of solving these problems. In fact, it is incapable of seeing the mysterious work of relations between things, and sometimes solves one problem only to create others. Each year, hundreds of millions of tons of waste are generated, much of it non-biodegradable. The earth, our home, is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. The elderly lament that once beautiful landscapes are now covered with rubbish. Industrial waste and chemical products utilized in cities and agricultural areas can lead to bioaccumulation of the organisms of the local population. These problems are closely linked to a throwaway culture, which affects the excluded just as it quickly reduces things to rubbish. But our industrial system at the end of its cycle of production and consumption has not developed the capacity to absorb and reuse waste and byproducts. We have not yet managed to adopt a circular model of production. Climate is a common good. It belongs to all and meant for all. At the global level, it's a complex system linked to many of the essential conditions for human life. A very solid scientific consensus indicates that we are presently witnessing a disturbing warming of the climatic system. In recent decades, this warming has been accompanied by a constant rise in sea level. It would appear an increase in extreme weather events. Humanity is called to recognize the need to change lifestyles, production, and consumption in order to combat this warming. A number of scientific studies indicate most global warming in recent decades is due to the great concentration of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen oxides, and others, released mainly as a result of human activity. As these gases build up in the atmosphere, they hamper the escape of heat produced by sunlight at the Earth's surface. The problem is aggravated by a model of development based on the intensive use of fossil fuels, which is at the heart of the worldwide energy system. Another determining factor has been increase in the changes of uses of the soil, principally deforestation for agricultural purposes. Things are made worse by the loss of tropical forests, which would otherwise help to mitigate climate change. Carbon dioxide pollution increases the acidification of the oceans and compromises the marine food chain. A rise in sea level can create extremely serious situations if we consider that a quarter of the world's population lives on the coast or nearby, and a majority of our megacities are situated in coastal areas. Climate change's worst impact will probably be felt by developing countries in coming decades. Many of the poor live in areas particularly affected by phenomena related to warming, and their means of subsistence are largely dependent on natural reserves and ecosystem services such as agriculture, fishing, and forestry. They have no other financial activities or resources which can enable them to adapt to climate change or to face natural disasters. And their access to social services and protection is very limited. There's an urgent need to develop policies so that in the next few years, the emission of carbon dioxide and other highly polluting gases can be drastically reduced, substituting for fossil fuels and developing resources of renewable energy. Worldwide, there's minimal access to clean and renewable energy. Other indicators of the present situation have to do with the depletion of natural resources. Here he's talking about the issue of water. We know it's not possible to sustain the present level of consumption in developed countries and wealthier sectors of society, where the habit of wasting and discarding has reached unprecedented levels. The exploitation of the planet has already exceeded acceptable limits, and we still have not solved the problem of poverty. Loss of biodiversity. The Earth's resources are being plundered because of short-sighted approaches to the economy, commerce, and production. The loss of forests and woodlands entails the loss of species which may constitute extremely important resources in the future, not only for food, but also for curing diseases and other uses. Different species contain genes which could be key resources in years ahead for meeting human needs and regulating environmental problems. It's not enough to think of different species as merely as potential resources to be exploited, while overlooking the fact that they have value in themselves. Each year sees the disappearance of thousands of plant and animal species, which we will never know, which our children will never see because they have been lost and forever are gone. The majority have become extinct for reasons related to human activity. Because of us, thousands of species will no longer give glory to God by their very existence, nor convey their message to us. We have no such right. It may well disturb us to learn of the extinction of mammals or birds, since they are more visible. But the good function of ecosystems also requires fungi, algae, worms, insects, reptiles, and an innumerable variety of microorganisms. Some less numerous species, though generally unseen, nonetheless play a critical role in maintaining the equilibrium of a particular place. In assessing the environmental impact of any project, concern is usually shown for its effects on soil, water, and air. Yet few careful studies are made of its impact on biodiversity, as if the loss of species or animals and plants were of little importance. Highways, new plantations, the fencing off of certain areas, the damming of water sources, and similar developments crowd out natural habitats, and sometimes break them up in a way that animal populations can no longer migrate or roam freely. As a result, some species face extinction. Let us mention, for example, those richly diverse lungs of our planet, which are the Amazon and the Congo basins, or the great aquifers and glaciers. We know how important these are for the entire Earth and for the future of humanity. The ecosystems of tropical forests possess an enormous complex biodiversity, which is almost impossible to appreciate fully. Yet, when these forests are burned down or leveled for purpose of cultivation, within the space of a few years, countless species are lost, and the areas frequently become arid wastelands. The replacement of virgin forests with plantations of trees, usually monocultures, is rarely adequately analyzed. Yet this can seriously compromise biodiversity, which the new species being introduced does not accommodate. The disappearance of ecosystem sustained by mangrove swamps is a source of serious concern. Oceans not only contain the bulk of the planet's water supply, but also most of the immense variety of living creatures, and many of them still unknown to us and threatened for various reasons. Particularly threatened are marine organisms, which we tend to overlook, like some forms of plankton. They represent a significant element in the ocean food chain, and species used for our food ultimately depend upon. In tropical and subtropical seas, we find coral reefs comparable to the great forests on dry land. They shelter approximately 1 million species, including fish, crabs, mollusks, sponges, and algae. Most of the world's coral reefs are already barren or in a state of constant decline. Who turned the wonder world of the seas into an underwater cemetery? This phenomenon is largely due to pollution, which reaches the sea as a result of deforestation, agricultural monocultures, industrial waste, destructive fishing methods, and is aggravated by the rise of temperature of the oceans. Nowadays, we are conscious of the disproportionate and unruly growth of many cities, which have become unhealthy to live in. not only because of pollution caused by toxic emissions, but also as a result of urban chaos, poor transportation, visual pollution, and noise. Many cities are huge, inefficient structures, excessively wasteful of energy and water. Neighborhoods, even those recently built, are congested, chaotic, and lacking in sufficient green space. We were not meant to be inundated by cement, asphalt, glass, and metal, and deprived of physical contact with nature. Furthermore, when the media and digital world become omnipresent, their influence can stop people from learning how to live wisely, to think deeply, and to love generously. True wisdom is the fruit of self-examination, dialogue, and generous encounter between persons. It is not acquired by a mere accumulation of data, which eventually leads to overload and confusion, a sort of mental pollution. Deterioration of the environment and society affects the most vulnerable people on the planet, global inequality. By everyday experience and scientific research shows that the gravest effects of all attacks on the environment are suffered by the poorest. Inequality affects not only individuals, but entire countries. It compels us to consider an ethics of international relations. A true ecological debt exists, particularly between the global north and south, connected to commercial imbalances, which affects on the environment and the disproportionate use of national resources by certain countries over long periods of time. The export of raw materials to satisfy markets in the industrialized north has caused harm locally, as for example, mercury pollution in gold mining or sulfur dioxide pollution in copper mining. The foreign debt of poor countries has become a way of controlling them, yet this is not the case where ecological debt is concerned. In different ways, developing countries, where the most important reserves of the biosphere are found, continue to fuel the development of richer countries at the cost of their own present and future. These situations have caused Sister Earth, along with the abandon of our world, to cry out, pleading that we take another course. Never have we hurt and mistreated our common home as we have in the last 200 years. Yet we are called to be instruments of God, our Father, so our planet might be what He desired when He created it and correspond with His plan for peace, beauty, and fullness. The problem is that we still lack culture needed to confront the crisis. We lack leadership capable of striking out on new paths and meeting the needs of the present with concern for all, without prejudice for coming generations. It's remarkable how weak international political responses have been. The failure of global summits on the environment make it plain that our politics are subject to technology and finance. There are too many special interests. Economic interests easily end up trumping the common good and manipulating information so that their own plans will not be affected. People may well have a growing ecological sensitivity. It has not succeeded in changing their harmful habits of consumption, which rather than decreasing appear to be growing at all times. Economic powers continue to justify the current global system, where priority tends to be given to speculation and the pursuit of financial gain, which fails to take context into account the effects on human dignity and the natural environment. The responsibility we have for God's earth means that human beings' indulgence must respect the laws of nature, the delicate equilibrium existing between nature's creations and the world. Together with our obligation to use the earth's goods responsibly, we are called to recognize that other living beings have a value of their own in God's eyes. By their mere existence, they bless Him and give Him glory. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the word creation has a broader meaning than just nature. It has to do with God's loving plan in which every creature has its own value and significance. We are the ones to lay our hands on things, attempting to extract everything possible from them while frequently ignoring or forgetting the reality in front of us. Human beings and material objects no longer extend a friendly hand to one another. The relationship has become confrontational. This has made it easy to accept the idea of infinite or unlimited growth, which proves so attractive to economists, financiers, and experts in technology. It's based on the lie that there's an infinite supply of the Earth's goods. And this leads to the planet being squeezed dry beyond every limit. The economy accepts every advance in technology with a view to profit. without concern for its potentially negative impact on human beings. When we speak of the environment, what we really mean is a relationship existing between nature and society, which lives in it. Nature cannot be regarded as something separate from ourselves or as a mere setting in which we live. We are part of nature, included in it, and thus in constant interaction with it. Consumerist vision of human beings, encouraged by the mechanisms of today's global economy, has a leveling effect on cultures, diminishing the immense variety which is the heritage of all humanity. Many intensive forms of environmental exploitation and degradation not only exhaust the resources which provide local communities with their livelihood, but also undo social structures which for a long time shaped cultural identity and their sense of the meaning of life and community. In the unstable neighborhoods of megacities, the daily experience of overcrowding and social anonymity can create a sense of uprootedness, which spawns antisocial behavior and violence. Once we think about the world we are leaving to future generations, we look at things differently. We realize that the world is a gift, which we have freely received and must share with others. Since the world has been given to us, we can no longer view reality in a purely utilitarian way, in which efficiency and productivity are entirely geared to our individual benefit. The environment is part of a logic of receptivity. It's a loan to each generation, which must then hand it on to the next. We know that technology based on the use of highly polluting fossil fuels, especially coal, but also oil and to a lesser degree gas, needs to be progressively replaced without delay until greater progress is made developing widely accessible sources of renewable energy. Reducing greenhouse gases requires honesty, courage, and responsibility, above all on the part of countries which are more powerful and pollute the most. The same mindset which stands in the way of making radical decisions to reverse the trend of global warming also stands in the way of achieving the goal of eliminating poverty. As long as production is increased, little concern is given whether it's at the cost of future resources or the health of the environment. As long as the clearing of forests increases production, no one calculates the losses entailed in the desertification of the land or harm done to biodiversity. An awareness of the gravity of today's cultural and ecological crisis must be translated into new habits. Many people know that our current progress and the mere amassing of things and pleasures are not enough to give meaning and joy to the human heart. In those countries which should be making the greatest changes in consumer habits, young people have a new ecological sensitivity and generous spirit, and some of them are making admirable efforts to protect the environment. They have grown up in a milieu of extreme consumerism and affluence, which makes it difficult to develop other habits. We are faced with an educational challenge. Environmental education has broad goals. It now includes a critique of the myths of modernity grounded in a utilitarian mindset of individualism, unlimited progress, competition, consumerism, and the unregulated market. It seeks also to restore the various levels of ecological equilibrium, establishing harmony with ourselves, with others, with nature, with other living creatures, and with God. Environmental education should facilitate making the leap towards transcendent, which gives ecological ethics its deepest meaning. The external deserts in the world are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast. For this reason, the ecological crisis is a summons to profound interior conversion. Ecological education can take place in a variety of settings: school, families, in the media, and elsewhere. Good education plants seeds when we are young, and these continue to bear fruit throughout life. We're always capable of going out of ourselves towards the other. Unless we do this, other creatures will not be recognized for their true worth. The Earth Charter asked us to leave behind a period of self-destruction and make a new start, but we have not as yet developed a universal awareness needed to achieve this. Here I would echo the courageous challenge. As never before in history, common destiny beckons us to seek a new beginning. Let ours be a time remembered for the awakening of a new reverence for life, firm resolved to achieve sustainability, quickening of the struggle for justice and peace, and the joyful celebration of life.
Thanks for tuning in to the Climate Guru podcast. Stay inspired, stay informed, and keep taking action for our planet's future. Until next time, and remember, together we can make a difference.